Hey everyone, I'm Jess and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding bootcamp for them. At Course Report, you can research the best coding bootcamps all over the world, find out which technical skills to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your very own bootcamp experience. Today, I'm so happy to have Juan Hart joining us to talk about how his coding bootcamp experience at Codesmith has helped him propel his tech career. Juan is a Codesmith graduate from 2020 and now works as an AI/ML global black belt in application development at Microsoft. And we're going to talk a bit about Codesmith, the AI certifications, how to be irreplaceable in today's very competitive tech job market, and so much more. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Juan. First, I want to just go back to your sort of beginnings before Codesmith. You were actually working as a systems engineer before Codesmith, late 2019. So what inspired you to enroll at a coding bootcamp at that point in your career?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very honored to be having this conversation. So, for me, as a systems engineer, metaphorically, I got the opportunity to be a jack of all trades, master of none. So, I dealt with hardware, I dealt with software, I dealt with networking, I dealt with integrating the system that I was working on into the operations where we were placing it. So, it gave me the opportunity to go wide, but not deep. I knew enough to be dangerous in a lot of areas, but I didn't really go deep in any specific area. And when I transitioned from living in the Middle East to coming back to the United States, software always just grabbed me. But I knew that I didn't know enough to just go get a software job. So I thought that the boot camp was like the perfect transition for me. And that's where I found Codesmith.
Yeah, I was wondering back in 2019, what stood out about Codesmith to you?
Codesmith for me was always a dream. From the very first time I saw some of the YouTube content, some of the workshops, the CSX, I was just blown away that this was free content. And if the free content was this valuable and this good, I can only imagine what you got from the program. And I also use platforms like Course Report to see what people were saying about the bootcamp. We all have bills to pay, right? The money was one thing, but the reviews were saying the best thing about Codesmith was Codesmith. And I just thought that that was so profound. So not only was it the content that they were putting out for free, but the reviews were people saying that Codesmith was the best part of Codesmith just deeply resonated with me. And even after attending a few workshops, I attended a workshop in Venice. I attended a workshop in New York. And from that moment on, I just knew that if I ever got into Codesmith, I would go. So once I got in, I went.
That's awesome. And we love to hear that Course Report was helpful to you as you were. So you've been out of the bootcamp for a few years now, but I'd love to know what were some of the main programming languages or tools or skills that you learned while at Codesmith?
So during my time at Codesmith, everything was JavaScript oriented. They hadn't started with the like AI ML programs that are Python oriented. We learned about the JavaScript ecosystem, so JavaScript, React, Node, which we were using to build servers and backend magic, as well as different ancillary things like YAML for the continuous integration, continuous development, CI/CD magic, and full stack development. So we built front ends, we built back ends, we built CI/CD pipelines, we implemented testing frameworks. So that was a wide array of just different skill sets that were picked up, but everything programming wise was in the JavaScript ecosystem.
And since you had your systems engineer background, once you were in the bootcamp, did you still find it challenging?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There were days that I wanted to cry, days that I just was so overwhelmed and life is happening outside of this boot camp, right? And so it definitely challenged me, but it brought out the best of me, honestly. And through it challenging me and bringing out the best in me, I feel like I was able to be a part of that for others. It definitely challenged me, even though I came in
Yeah.
fairly tech savvy. It challenged me and pushed me in a way that I'm still grateful for to this day.
And how did Codesmith get you ready for the tech job hunt? Like, what were their career services?
Codesmith's hiring framework or the tools that they gave us have been invaluable for me all the way up until now. I've done two job hunts since I left Codesmith in 2019, 2020. And some of the most meaningful insight that they gave us was around mindset, right? Even though boot camp was as challenging as what it was, they gave us the honest, like, hey, you're just getting started. You know, the job hunt will challenge you in ways that boot camp did not, which, some boot camps just send you out into the world as if it's just this rosy picture and you'll just go get a job, and that's not the case. So the first thing was just mindset, understanding where you are in the journey and understanding that if you allow it to make you better, it will. If you allow it to make you bitter, it will. What will you allow it to do? So the first thing was just really getting the mindset. And outside of the mindset, they gave us a framework for finding jobs,
Mm.
applying to jobs. So like, hey, I will find a job on LinkedIn, and instead of just applying, right, I'm going to find a job on LinkedIn. I'm going to find a technical recruiter. I'm going to go read an engineering blog. I'm going to reach out to that recruiter directly via email. My message will be very strategic in what I'm communicating relative to my experience, the engineering blog, what I can offer, as well as not coming off as needy. Like, hey, I'm available these days during this time frame. I would love to hear from you.
Mm.
So it gave me the opportunity to have the right mindset and line up every shot. So that way I know when I take a shot where it lands, as opposed to just shooting everywhere and just praying and hoping for the best.
That sounds like invaluable advice and preparation. When you were applying for jobs, just as you were leaving Codesmith, did you feel like you were applying for senior roles, or were you kind of going more for middle or even entry level roles?
I was going from mid to senior.
Since you graduated from Codesmith back in 2020, have you felt supported by the Codesmith community or the careers team since you left? Like, have you been able to kind of go back to them if you had any questions or needed some help with networking?
When I finished Codesmith at the end of 2019, 2020, COVID happened. I moved
Hmm.
back down south, so I wasn't co-located. So it made it a bit harder. Kind of, I was just out in the wild by myself essentially. But what they gave me, I didn't even need to go back or reach out. Our alumni network and everything was very strong. It's very engaging, and there are opportunities there. But what they gave me in the program, I never really needed to go back other than to try to like mentor or help support however I could.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your tech career since Codesmith. You mentioned that there's been two job searches for you since 2020 graduation. What was that first tech role that you landed right after Codesmith?
Yep. So my first tech job out of Codesmith was for a consultancy, formerly known as Formidable, now they're known as Nearform. And I got a mid-level role as a front-end software engineer. And Formidable has a very expansive open source software library. And that was what attracted them to me. Codesmith is a huge evangelist for like open source software,
Mm.
right? During your time there, you build a developer tool that helps developer build things, which, requires a different frame of thinking. And the company that hired me, Formidable, also had a very expansive open source software repository. We had like 500 million downloads last time I was there. So Codesmith was definitely like the catalyst or the thing that led that opportunity to me or attracted that opportunity just via the open source software contributions that we made.
And when did you know it was time to move on to that second role after the
Mhm.
Formidable one?
I knew it was time to move on when I got laid off,
Oh,
which so some of us experience, and it's totally normal, it's totally valid. And when it happened, I leaned on what Coach Smith gave me. I just went right back into the job
mm,
hunt, applying for jobs the way that I did before. And instead of the initial job hunt, which took me 100 applications, it took me 50 the second time. But I used the exact same framework, I used the exact same approach. And yet again, the job hunt, it made me better. So I knew it was time to move on once I got the,
yeah,
the
you got that notice.
the
Yeah.
got the notice. Absolutely.
Overall, in your job interviews, have employers been interested in your Codesmith bootcamp experience?
They have not. They have not. They'll ask about the time there, right? What I
Hmm.
did, what were some cool things I was a part of, which I got to be a part of a really significant dev tool called Reactide. And it was the first IDE dedicated to React. And we had a lot of plug, a lot of publicity. So they would talk more about that than they would about like my time at Codesmith,
Mm.
which is just yet again another nod to Codesmith for having us produce things that projects that they'd rather talk about as opposed to like, hey, what is Codesmith, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
also as a fellow, I also got the opportunity to shape my narrative a little differently, right? So I went through the program, then I actually worked at Codesmith, so I could actually speak in a way that says like, hey, I went to the boot camp, I also worked there.
Hmm. When you were working there, were you doing so as an instructor or as more of a mentorship kind of role?
As a fellow, I assumed the role of someone who went through the program, but also would teach lectures. I was also leading some of the groups that were building products and projects, reviewing resumes, leading project groups or like PMing.
Hmm.
And honestly, just being there for people who are going through something that I went through, right? And you
Hmm.
have those days that you want to cry, you want to break the computer, you want to give up. And those were probably the most meaningful moments, not necessarily the technology, right? But the moments where I could be a human for another human and say like, I've been there, it's temporary, and we'll get through it together, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. AI obviously is such a big deal in the
Mhm.
tech world right now, and I'd love to know like how you switched from just being software engineer to more of this AI machine learning role now at Microsoft.
I have been working with AI since 2012. I used to work in the Middle East on a MIT prototype that used to do some really interesting things. And as a systems engineer for that platform, I was next to it, operating it, updating it. When the generator or anything would go down, I was a part of keeping this thing online. So I've had the opportunity to be in AI for a very long time. So my time at Codesmith was very complementary to my systems engineering background, and it just gave me something that a lot of people don't necessarily have this early in the AI game. So it wasn't necessarily Codesmith giving me the AI opportunity. It was being involved with AI and then going deep in software and ending up at Microsoft where they needed people that are not just AI savvy, but software savvy. So the stars really just aligned. I'm very fortunate.
And when you were getting into Microsoft,
Mhm,
did they require you have any certifications when you accepted the role, or have you gotten the
mhm.
certifications since?
I have. I recently hit my 1 year mark with Microsoft about a month ago. And in my first year with Microsoft, I've gotten roughly four certifications. Three fundamental certs, so like an Azure fundamental cert, an Azure AI fundamental cert, and an Azure data fundamental cert. And then an advanced or intermediary cert for building Azure AI solutions. So I didn't need to come into the house with certifications, but to stay in the house, I definitely needed certifications, and I've gotten a few since.
I have to know, how hard are those Microsoft certs to pass?
The fundamental certs are not that bad.
Mm.
They lay a really good foundation for just like, hey, what are the fundamentals of Azure, right? This cloud ecosystem, and
Hmm.
what are some data fundamentals, and what are some AI fundamentals. But the advanced or intermediary certification, it was definitely more challenging because it wasn't a fundamental level of understanding. It's like, hey, if you were going to build this solution, how would you build it? What are the implications? What are the pros? What are the cons? How do these things work? That one was a lot more challenging, and I took my time with that one. I spent maybe 8 months on the job before I even started looking at the cert because when I first started studying for it, it was all just over my head. Like I had
Yeah.
no idea. So spent some time on the job and then revisited the certification. It did me well by doing so, as opposed to trying to like stuff it in my brain in the beginning where I don't understand it. Waiting, doing the job, and then revisiting it definitely gave me an opportunity to understand things in a way that I wouldn't have understood them because it wouldn't have had context at that point. So one of them was very challenging, and the other three they weren't like walks in the park, but they were just more fundamental, more conceptual. Whereas the advanced certification was like, hey, how would you actually do these things? How would you build these things?
Yeah, a level up for sure. Yeah. And in general, what are your main responsibilities or the types of projects that you work on now at Microsoft? Like, are you building AI models or are you more like managing things?
As a global black belt at Microsoft, what I do is I help customers do one of two things. I either help them ideate on an AI solution and then move from ideating to POC MVP, or let's say you've already got a POC MVP and you want to scale, right? So I help you scale. So I'm either doing two motions. I'm helping you go from idea to thing or thing to bigger thing. And some examples might be so a customer has like a call center. And when you think of normal call center interactions, someone calls, someone answers, there's a conversation, hopefully it gets resolved, maybe it doesn't, and the call ends. For the customer service representative or the agent that's fielding the call, at the end of that call, they have to manually write a summary, right? So a summary of this conversation, and then they move on to the next call. So let's say that that takes 5 minutes. Cool. So we can help a customer say, hey, we can actually build a solution that listens to the phone call, transcribes the conversation, sends that transcription to an LLM. The LLM summarizes it and stores it in the same place that the agent would have. So now, if I could save 1,000 agents 5 minutes, right, as well as lighten their workload so that they can be more focused on solving problems as opposed to writing summaries, it's an operational enhancement. And it's not necessarily going to drive more revenue, but it will bring operational expenses down. So we build solutions like that.
I love that example. And how quickly is your job changing? Like, do you feel like since you started at Microsoft a year ago, the AI components and things that you are working with are already shifting and leveling up in ways?
I am just so amazed at how fast it's moving. I've been in tech since 2008, in various capacities. In a previous life, I used to work on generators, right? So I've been around technology my entire career, and even software was moving relatively fast when I was in software full time. But AI is it's Usain Bolt sprinting. Like what was
Mm.
true yesterday is not true today, and what's true today will not be true tomorrow.
Mm.
It's moving faster than anything I've ever seen in in my lifetime, you
Mm.
know? And it with it moving fast and the ways in which it's moving and the uncertainty, like some people have predictions of where nobody knows where we
Mhm.
go, what we do. So even though it's moving really fast, it's by far one of the most exciting times in tech.
Mm.
I feel like I've ever had the opportunity to experience.
Yeah, you just touched on that, like that prediction of like, will software engineers and other technicians be like replaced, quote unquote, by AI?
Hmm.
As someone who's working in AI, has a software engineering background, what do you think makes someone like you irreplaceable in today's tech job market?
Yes. These are some very interesting times, Jeff. They're very interesting times where areas of expertise almost become commoditized via this AI, like doctors, lawyers, accountants, these long held positions are almost being eaten. Like, there was that old saying like software is eating the world. If software is eating the world, AI is gobbling it. And the bites are as big as continents with each bite.
Yeah.
Like, so in this day and age, I'm a believer that we're gonna have like two revolutions, right? Since we're talking about people who think that they know where we go and making
Hmm.
predictions, the first wave will be people using AI replacing people who aren't using AI. So in order to be irreplaceable in this phase, learn to use the tool. It's very analogous to when the tractor came. And all right, people used to till the field manually. The tractor comes and you no longer need to till the field. So do you learn how to work on the tractor? Do you change the tires? Do you change the oil? Do you learn how to operate it? And I think that this AI is going to push us to that next level to where it's like, hey, no, you no longer need to till the field, but what are you going to do?
Mm.
How, and if you don't learn to work with the tractor, you will be replaced by the tractor. And one day the tractor may drive itself, right? We're not there yet, but the first transition to be irreplaceable is to learn to use the tool.
There's also this misconception that a career changer should like just become an AI engineer. But I think your career trajectory proves that, you know, you don't just become an AI engineer overnight or in 12 weeks. And that software engineering is still a key component in that career. I don't know, like how important do you feel like these foundational engineering skills have been in your career now at Microsoft?
Honestly, it's been instrumental because even though I'm not necessarily writing software all day, every day, I'm working with services and concepts that are software oriented. So in this day and age, I think that we're moving towards knowing enough to be dangerous and then working with the AI to kind of like go deeper. All of it's built on software, software fundamentals, software concepts, scaling, response, it under the hood, all of the foundational software knowledge that I got at Codesmith still applies because it's all software, but it's just the utilization, it's the architecture, it's all of the different things that are built on top of the software. So the the foundational knowledge and understanding that I got during my time at Codesmith has been pivotal because everything is built on top of that. If I didn't know anything about software and how it works, and I would be someone who's working with a magic box that I have no idea, what's going on in, right? I would round it out to say that my foundational understanding of software has been pivotal in my role at Microsoft.
Looking back on the past couple of years, was enrolling at Codesmith worth it for you? Like, has it helped your career in the ways that you expected it to when you enrolled at Codesmith back in 2019?
I would say that it was worth everything. And for myself, I had just gotten back from overseas, and at the end of 2018, I was still figuring out where I was going to go next. I started a boot camp in New Orleans. And like I mentioned earlier, I said if I ever got into Codesmith, I would go. I moved from New Orleans to New York in a matter of a few months. And I got there, I didn't know where I would live. My girlfriend's aunt let me live in her apartment, but I would have stayed at school. I was that serious about it. So absolutely, it was worth it. And where I am now was beyond my wildest imagination. And Codesmith was a huge catalyst in where I am today. So it was worth every bit of the inconvenience, of the toil, of the uncertainty. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was worth every bit.
And is there anything at all that you would have changed about your Codesmith experience now that you're looking back at it?
But to be honest, I wouldn't change a thing. I chased the dream. Like it was something that like I felt, and even like during my journey, I was in a software program in New Orleans, and I'm talking about up and moving to New York, and they're like, "Why would you do that?" And to go up there and to just chase a dream
Yeah.
in one of the most special places in the world, and to experience it, right? The days where it's so cold outside, I could just barely, I could barely move, or being so frustrated with the cold that my eyes well up, and it just to chase a dream, and 5 years later just to see where I landed by betting on myself and taking that chance and listening to myself, not what people were telling me, but what I was telling me. And for it to come full circle and to know that Codesmith was a huge part of where I am today, like I wouldn't change a thing. I would change nothing about my experience.
And my last question for you is what is your advice to these incoming Codesmith students on how to set themselves up for success in their new tech careers?
I think that this will land because there's just this fundamental input output concept that computer science, but it transcends computer
Mm,
science. Like life is input and output, and you're only going to get out what you put in, right? And if you give it your all and just trust that in giving your all, it will come together.
mm,
It will come together. It may not be tomorrow, next week, next month, but I can promise it will. And one thing that's different is during my time, we didn't have the threat of AI replacing something that I'm spending my time cultivating and crafting. So I would also recommend keep your head up because there are things on the horizon that you need to be aware of because they affect us in our job.
mm.
So not only just giving it your all, but also being aware of what's happening in the world that affects what you're currently doing. And that doesn't necessarily mean stop, pivot, but be aware
Mhm.
and know that this thing is something that you can leverage, not necessarily be replaced by.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect place to wrap up this Q&A. Thanks so much for speaking with us today, Juan. And thanks so much to all of you for watching. We're going to be posting a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for Codesmith, just in case you're inspired to apply for any of their upcoming cohorts. And in the meantime, you can follow Course Report on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you're a bootcamp alumni, don't forget to post a review of your coding bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone who's thinking of getting into tech today.